Hey guys, it's Arcade and I'm back with another video, and in this one I'll be editing your projects again. So yeah, you sent me your music and I will be editing it. I'll try to make it better and try to give you some tips on how to improve it. And of course, all the edits that I do are just based on my opinion, how I would go on with the track, but you might agree with some of them and you might not agree with some of them. That's okay. So yeah, thanks to everyone who actually participated and sent their FLP files. So today I'm actually gonna do 5 projects and I'm just gonna go through them, show you all the edits that I made and why I made them. Also, this video is brought to you by Skillshare. I'm gonna talk a little bit about them later. So yeah, anyways, without further ado, let's get to the project number 1. So this one is by Moe Beats. I'm gonna play it and then I'm gonna show you all the edits that I've made. So the melodies are really good. Also utilizing the effects, good arrangement. Not a drop. So yeah, a decent idea, kind of like a electro house or something like that. I like the idea, I like the melodies, the arrangement is good. Where it lost power was definitely the drop. And there are a few reasons why, and I'm gonna explain. And I'm gonna show you what changes I've made to this track. So first of all, the kick is really weak. And that may be because he doesn't have, the right samples. Really weak and doesn't pierce through the mix at all. And here is actually my version, and this is the kick I selected. It's from Kashmir Spec. As you know, I love Kashmir Spec. I would recommend everyone to get it. So that's how I would replace the kick, that's for sure. And another thing that was really weak in the drop in his version is the bass. So he made a little mistake here, but so here's the bass, right? Now I like that he included this gritty bass and also the sub bass, but I cannot really hear the sub bass properly. And the reason is because he put it in a high octave. So the sound is fine, like the bass sound is fine, but you cannot put it like so high up. So what you want is put it octave lower. And right there you get those sub-bassy notes. So you want to hit those low frequencies. And also these gritty basses, in theory they could stay there, but I think putting them lower as well resulted in a better sound. So here is my version where I put the sub-bass lower and also some of the gritty basses. And just by putting them lower, you already get this more aggressive sound. That already makes the sound way more aggressive and it will sound fuller in the drop. Now, last thing I changed is the lead melody sound, and that's also not very strong sound. I mean, it could work, but depending on what he was going for, this reminds me a little bit like Alan Walker leads. But there's just way too many high-pitched leads. The result is that the sound is not as full. And also, he has like 2 different melodies playing at the same time, which it could work. To me, it sounded a little bit confusing in the whole mix. It's decent, it could work, but both of the melodies are kind of high-pitched, which I didn't like very much. So instead I went for a little bit of a different sound. So here is my version, and instead of the high-pitched leads, I went with this sound, which is from Crank Nexus pack. And by the way, he also used Nexus, so he has it. Which again is a bit more aggressive. Then I used this sound, like brassy synth sound. And I keep some of his sounds as well, as another layer to the whole thing. So together it sounds like this. So yeah, overall it will just result in a more full drop. One more thing I added was another hi-hat and a clap in the second repetition. Even though he added it to the drums, I just wanted to have it even more out there. Anyway, so I mostly changed the drop. I pretty much left the rest as it was. And I think he did a really good job, like creating the melodies and chords and a cool atmosphere for the song. So let me show you how the drop sounds once I applied some of the changes I showed. So this is the build-up. And so yeah, those are my changes to the drop. Let me know what you think. Did I improve the song or did I make it worse? But I thought this was pretty decent edit. So yeah, that's the first project. Let's move on to the project number 2. Now, before we get to the project number 2, let me just talk about our sponsor today, which is Skillshare. I'm sure you heard about Skillshare before. It's basically a site, a platform where you can learn new skills by taking classes. And you can literally learn just about anything, including how to make music. So if you want to improve in making music, check out Skillshare. As you can see, we can search for anything, for example, FL Studio. And here we have a bunch of classes that teach you in detail about how to make music in FL Studio. This is better than watching YouTube tutorials because these are actually detailed classes that can take up a little bit more time, but they are definitely worth it. I would personally recommend this one by Chester Sky, called Music Producer Masterclass, and it teaches you how to make electronic music in FL Studio from start to finish, and he even gives some tips on how to publish and make money from your music. So yeah, check it out, link will be below in the description, and if you use my link you can get 2 months of Skillshare for free. After that the prices start as low as $10 a month. So yeah, check it out, link below in the description. Now is the perfect time to learn new skills since everybody is in the quarantine. There is really not much to do, so learning a new skill is a great way to pass some time. Now let's move on to the track number 2, and it's this one submitted by Matt, and let's have a listen. So yeah, we've got this synth pop track, I guess. Sort of has a inspiration from synth pop or synth wave. At least that's how I felt about it. And I've made some changes to this one that pretty much changed the whole track. Maybe I took it to a little bit different direction that he intended to. So instead of having these long notes, which are pretty aggressive, but instead I actually went with something more subtle, which is these synthwave type notes. I don't know why, but I felt like that would be a better idea. I went with the classic synthwave rhythm. And of course, it's not as strong as this. But that's just the direction I decided to go with. I also moved this sound octave down. I thought there was too many high-pitched sounds. So yeah, a lot of sounds here sort of creates this chaos. It could work, but I felt like there's too many of the same frequencies in those sounds. So instead I deleted some of them and just kept it simple. And then brought some of them back in the second repetition of the drop. But moved this arpeggio octave down, just so we don't have so many sounds in the high octaves. So that's one tip I would give to this music producer: differentiate between octaves when you have more layers of sounds. I definitely didn't change too much about this song other than the rhythm, and changed some of these octaves. And of course I changed the drum beat as well. I added this harder snare. So instead of this sound, I went with this sound. My version sounds a little bit more subtle, which maybe that's not what he was going for, but let's have a listen. And then I decided to do a little bit of a twist in the next drop, where I just created a completely new melody. But yeah, here's how my drop sounds. Okay, now let's have a listen to the second drop where I introduce this melody. Yeah, I just couldn't help myself, sorry. Anyways, that is pretty much it for this second song. I think he actually asked me about how to improve the breakdowns, and if you want a tip for a breakdown, one thing would be to slowly add in back the sounds. So instead of putting everything right away, you can just start with some of the sounds. Like so, you know? And then slowly add back the sounds. That makes the breakdown flow a little bit better than if you just add all the sounds right away. I'm not sure if I improved it. I thought it was a pretty cool song to begin with, but I thought the sounds were too aggressive, so I went with a subtle version of the song. Now, project number 3, this was supposed to be a Porter Robinson style track, and I think he nailed the melodies. Let's have a listen. So yeah, I think the idea and the melodies are really good, but the mix is lacking a lot. And the big reason why is there's just way too many sounds with the same exact like color or body of the sound. They have the same frequencies pretty much. You can hear this lead and this lead. Very much similar sounds, even the chords. And everything just sort of mashes together, and you cannot really work out what is what because everything plays on the same frequencies pretty much. So it's just one big ball of noise. But I really like the melodies. And another thing is the drum is just not hitting hard at all. Like you can barely hear it. Like you can barely hear it in the mix. And same goes for the claps. So yeah, everything is just sort of on the same levels, and then you cannot really work out any sound properly. So what I did is did some mixing and edited some of the sounds. So here is my version. One thing I really liked is the fills he made. So those were pretty cool. Also, I see he did the sign chaining with volume automation, and I thought this wasn't really enough. So I instead do the sign chaining with gross beat, and I choose the sign chain preset, set it up like this. I think that is actually a little bit harder sign chaining. And then I increase the volume of the kick. And you can just hear it way more in the mix. And also I add this gritty bass, which complements the chords really well. Without it, the chords would be kind of bland, but with it, they definitely stand out a little bit more. And also, I just played with the volume of the claps as well. In the original, you can hear it. And then, in my version, I added a lot more reverb to the claps. Now, the biggest change I probably made is the melody. Now, instead of having all these sounds, like the arpeggio and the melody, playing pretty much the same lead sound, and just overlapping everywhere, I instead actually used the sounds he used in the breakdown, which are really good. So I instead use this sound, which I'm not even sure what sound it is. He used MIDI out, and I'm not even sure how it is set up, like what sound this is actually playing. But it's a really good sound. And he used it in the breakdown, but he didn't use it in the drop. So instead of having all these lead synths that sound very much the same, I make sure to make a bigger variation between the sounds I use. This is what I have for the melody, layered with these sounds as well. So yeah, those are the sounds I used for the melody instead of these. Because these sounds fit more for the chords. So yeah, that's the biggest difference I've made, and I also deleted the arpeggio altogether and put it in the third repetition of the drop only. And those are pretty much the biggest differences in this edit. Let's have a listen now. And that is pretty much it for this one. And of course, I did a little bit more mixing that I'm showing, but it's really hard to show all the details that I actually edited without having this video be like a few hours long. So I actually did work on the mix a little bit more in each song. But if you want to see more about how I mix these songs, check out my previous video which I've made that only focuses on how I actually mix these songs that you send me. So check it out, link will be below in the description. Now let's move on to the project number 4. So this one is made by Zarin. This one was pretty good to begin with, but I decided to make a few changes to make it harder, I guess. This is a trap project, so let's have a listen. So this is a pretty cool trap song. I gotta say the mix is really clean, but the track itself doesn't stand out as much. But I'm not really sure what he was going for. Was he going for like a hard trap song or more like a chilled out trap song? Because this is more on the chill side, I would say. It just doesn't have that power. So I made some changes to make this a little bit more harder. So let me show you what I did. So right off the bat, I took the bass and made it a little bit more distorted by putting the wave shaper on it and bringing back some of the high frequencies. In his version, he actually deleted all the high frequencies, which results in a nice 808 sub bass. But I just felt like we could add in more high frequencies and distortion to make this a little bit harder. Also, the drums in his version are, again, they are clean, but they are like really basic. Now I cannot say this is bad, but I wanted something stronger. So again, I added a little bit more sounds. So instead just of having this kick, I actually add this hit, and this hit, and this one. Which results in a really powerful kick on some of the repetitions. It doesn't have to hit every time, but sometimes it's good to have a really powerful kick that stands out. And I also added this clap, so the whole thing sounds like this. So yeah, that is my drum beat. He did a really good job with the hi-hats, so I didn't really mess around with them too much. However, I did add another hi-hat to layer it and put it a little bit lower in the octave, so it's a fuller hi-hat. But the pattern is really cool. Good job on that. So instead of having this, which is sort of a thin hi-hat, I went with this. And yeah, then we have the brass. I added some more reverb and boosted some of these frequencies here to make it a bit fodder. Also, this sound was a bit complicated. I played with the OTT compressor to kind of have the release to be more obvious in the mix. So the release of this sound has more power. It's not as plucky, it has this release and sustain. Also, I thought this sound was too low in the original mix. So I just increased the cutoff a little bit. Also, in the second repetition of the drop, I make this lead octave higher. Just so there is this forward movement in the whole song. It actually gradually gets more and more intense. Without further ado, here is my version of the song. So yeah, that is pretty much it. Let me know what you think. I think I made this a bit more stronger, a bit more fat. Not sure if that's what he was going for, but that's what I was going for. Anyways, now let's move on to the last project, which is project number 5. So this is a tropical house project. Now let's have a listen. Really love these pizzicato strings. So yeah, this is a pretty nice project. I really like the chords and melodies, and the sound is not bad either. One thing that was kind of missing here is the breakdown. It's a bit empty and repetitive, but I do love these chords. Those are a really nice touch. So there are a few things I've changed, so let's get to it. So the first thing is he has way too many plucky chord sounds. So we have these drop chords, a lot of plucks, a lot of delay. Then we have these, which again, so many plucks and so much delay on them. That's one mistake I think he made, just way too many layers of plucky chords with delay. And because of the delay, they sort of get mixed together. And I think Tropical House is more about sort of chill vibes, and these plucks are just way in your face. So what I did is pretty much get rid of some of the plucks completely and change these plucks, lower the volume of them. So it's more of a calm, plucky sound. Also, I added this note in the piano every now and then. So it's not like this, but it has this movement. Also, I played with the EQ, boosting the higher frequencies a little bit more on the piano. Then one big mistake he made is actually having reverb on the kick, which is definitely not a good idea. And this kick actually is used for sidechaining, and if you have reverb on it, it will affect the sidechaining. And I think it made the pumping effect too hard, so the melody goes low for a long period of time. You can hear the pumping effect a lot in this song, which might have been because of the delay or reverb on the kick. So I just delete that completely. And also there is very little reverb on the claps, so I added some more on those. Now let's move on to the bass. So here's the bass on his version. One thing I've made a little bit interesting is these bass plucks. So he just has them in this straight rhythm, which is fine, but to make this more interesting, I went with this rhythm where I switch between different octaves of these plucks. Just adds a little bit more groove to the whole song. So yeah, those are the changes I've made to the bass. Now the biggest change I've made is the melody for sure. So I didn't really like the plucky melody he used. It's a bit too aggressive pluck for a Tropical House track. Now I like that he has this portamento effect on it, but I think this plug is just way too harsh. So instead I added few more sounds to the plug. I keep this plug, but I make it lower in volume. But I add this flute, which I think is great for Future House. You can actually get it in Flex. That flute really makes a big difference in the whole song, and that's what I add as another layer to the melody. So maybe some of you prefer the original plug, but let me show you how the song sounds after the edits I've made. And yeah, that is pretty much it for this song, and that was the last song. One thing I wanted to mention is I also added these tambourines and lowered the loudness on the effects. But yeah, that is pretty much it. Let me know what you think. Did I make these edits better or did I make them worse? It's actually pretty hard to edit these tracks because everybody works in a different way. So yeah, it's a bit hard to explain, but I hope you still enjoyed this video, enjoyed the edits I've made. If you want your song to be edited by me, send it to my email, link will be below in the description. And also, big thanks go to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to check them out to get a free trial of Skillshare, link will be below in the description as well. Again, thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.